Hey everyone, welcome back to What's Next with We. This is another episode. This is in the SaaS series. So, What's Next with We basically delves into a particular industry through storytelling, and we get to know from experts on what's next in that space. Once again, this is the SaaS series. I have a dear friend, a special guest today in my podcast, ex-colleague, close friend, and now a founder of a SaaS startup, which we'll get to know more. Varun Varma, welcome to What's Next with We.
Thank you, Vishal. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Varun, jumping right in, would be great to know your story. Pretty unique in many ways, from doing your engineering to MBA in the agriculture, if I'm not wrong, agriculture space, jumping into startups, and now leading and being a founder of a SaaS startup. Would be great to know your story.
Perfect. Yeah, Vishal. So yes, I have a very conventional story itself, how generally all of us in this country have gone through. So again,
True.
I did my engineering, but in a very unique space, which is agricultural engineering. Not very lot of people do that. And then post that, I was not sure whether I want to stay in that, but you know that how BTech happens in
True.
India.
True.
And then and then again with everyone, I also thought, okay, let's do MBA. And then of course, given that everyone was preparing for it, I also did that. Went to IMA, and then in IMA I realized, okay, there's something else also happening in the market. So because at that time, you know, right, how people just go for consulting in corporates and everywhere, and that's when something else hit me, and it was the startup bug. Not just to start up, more like work for a startup. That was different kind of work,
True.
right? Which in earlier in 2015, what used to happen, right? And it was a shift. It was a kind of shift from corporate to startups itself.
Correct.
Then there I moved into. I worked for a corporate for just 3 months. I'll tell you. I was a management trainee. I left it and then moved to this company called Porter, and it
Okay.
was very early in this phase. And then, in fact, within 6 months itself, I got laid off also.
Oh,
So
okay.
that was the
Interesting.
kind of story I had, and then moved to Traction, spent there for 2 years, moved to another company called Zapper. So that's how been my story in the startup ecosystem. And the thing was, best part about startup is I got to do a lot of things together
True.
and handling a larger set of responsibilities and
Correct.
your result areas, right? So
I can
that
second
was,
that. I can second that
yeah,
attraction. So,
exactly. And eventually, all of my batchmates from MBA, 3 years down the line, they were working for corporates, moved to startup. So
true.
eventually, it had to happen. Had to
True.
happen. So yeah, and then after this pandemic hit in, so HuddleUp also was born. Of course, we'll talk more about it, but that has been my entire story today.
Awesome, Varun. Awesome. So just wanted to quickly check. I think interesting story from MBA where most folks would like to get into consulting, large corporate, and have a settled life. You took a,
Mhm.
especially in 2015, 16, where people were still more conventional, would like to join large companies and settle down quickly. I think you had a little bit of a non-conventional path, got into
Yeah,
startups, did multiple things, and
yeah,
now being a founder. Obviously, both responsibilities are different. Being an employee in a startup and being a founder in a startup, two different ball games altogether. Did just a quick, very curious question? Did entrepreneurship come along the way? Did you train? Was it internal, or did it just sprung
I
up during
think
the pandemic?
yeah. So I think it's a natural progression. Over that time, when you've been working with multiple startups, you've seen
True.
so many things, right? You've worked for different functions. You have seen company growing from 50 people to 500 people, right?
Correct.
So you get to learn a lot of things on your own. Then you also know, okay, these things can be figured out. You start seeing the problems in your life happening around you,
True.
which earlier when you're working in a corporate, it's very difficult,
You
right?
typically own things. I think ownership is
Yes,
much higher in startups, and that kind of
exactly.
translates to becoming a founder later on, is what I
Yeah,
have experienced as well.
that's true. That's true. So what happens is when we're working in startup, right? You're seasoned to see the problems around you, the gaps around you.
Exactly.
That's like an inherent thing.
Correct.
And that's when there's a moment when I realized, okay, there's this huge gap, and the gap which I felt personally, that is also very important. Something you feel personally, you tend to solve it. And that's when this entrepreneurial bug hit me. Otherwise, it was not like 2015. I was one of the person who was more like, okay, I'll just work for a company and see how it works, because I need to learn the industry first,
True.
right? So later on, it was all natural, I would say. Just felt over the time that, okay, just take that decision and just go ahead. Take a plunge, as what people
Got it.
say.
Now, as they say, right, in the startup world, you jump out of the aeroplane and you kind of build your parachute along the way, right? And you kind of
Yeah, yeah,
hopefully
yeah.
soft land. Awesome. Jumping on, I just wanted to check. I mean, since I know you're in the SaaS space, before jumping on to your getting to know more about what you guys do at HuddleUp, wanted to get your thoughts on why SaaS and why are you guys building in India? The thoughts on India being a startup hub. So, would like to
Mm-hmm.
get to know your thoughts on
Mm-hmm.
how India, and why you building from India for the world.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. So, Vishal, let me take you a decade before, right? At 2010-11 times, we all were saying the software is eating the market.
True.
That's when we used to have the softwares of the
It
CDs.
still is, right? I
Right?
think it's still going on.
It is still. Now at this stage, right now in 2022, the SaaS is eating the softwares,
True. Oh,
right?
awesome. I think I've got content for my description on my YouTube podcast.
Exactly. Now the
Awesome.
thing is, there's a reason being because earlier there were few problems only that were being solved by SaaS. But over the time, people have realized, okay, there's so many problems, different areas, whether it's B2B, B2C, can be solved through SaaS. Again, considering, keep aside how the SaaS model works. It is
Right.
generally, it's been seen as very lucrative, sustainable model, of course.
Correct.
But look at the way where at the root cause level, how it is solving the problem. And as most of the SaaS is doing, right, it's making your life easy.
True.
It's not going to completely transform everything. As in, for example, if I take a CRM example, CRM is not going to close the sales on its own, but it is enabling the people to solve it quickly.
True.
So similarly, there's every function, everything, everywhere. These all the founders, new age founders, they've worked in it. They have now found a gap in the solving it. So that's the best part. Secondly, India is becoming right now the hub, because past 5-6 years we have seen how it has grown, right? And of course, people are saying 100 plus unicorn, so and so forth, SaaS, fintech, a lot of things are there. Of course, that is one thing. It's all which is always gonna, you can say, motivate the new folks. Of course, that's the best thing. But if you go into the core problems, India is building for the global. That is going to scale up. It has just started in the past few years. It is going to scale up enormously. The world is shrinking, right? It's not just people are just using only the softwares or the SaaS manufactured in US itself. They're moving for better alternatives. They're looking for better alternatives and looking into global market. And that's where Indians and the founders here in India have been able to make it very intuitive for the global market, right? So
Got it.
now the thing is, a lot of softwares may be solving the same problem, but how you make that software more intuitive, experience-wise. Experience is one another layer that has come, right?
Correct.
Not
True.
just functionality experience,
True.
and that's what in India people have been able to solve it really well. So in the next 5 years, heavily bullish, and that's why I also ask a lot of people, join SaaS startups, start working with them, see that global perspective, see that global experience that you're gonna get, how people are doing GTM sitting in India, and so on, so we're building for the global market. Very interesting space, hard but interesting, but achievable definitely.
Nay,
So heavily bullish.
nay, great to hear that. I think tailwinds are there. You have, apart from the tailwinds in terms of talent, building it here, cost arbitrage and building it in India, you have the other side where you have your customers, where customers are
Yes.
now open to, I think, using SaaS based software rather than using legacy based softwares, right?
Exactly.
So I think even now customers are opening up to these new age, it could be vertical solutions or horizontal based solutions. Customers are all over the world, everybody's digital. So I think also I am, as Varun, as you rightly mentioned, I'm also quite bullish of the space. It's relatively easier to start, build, understand the problem sitting out in India, wherever in India, and building those solutions, I think, for the world.
In fact, on top of it, as I said, right, as SaaS and its model itself, right, how it makes, as in it integrates with multiple things, makes easier for people to use.
Correct.
Um, Earlier, the software requires a lot of implementation. That these days, it's a plug and play. So it's
True.
natural that people will move towards that. So
Nay,
why not
I
the entire global
totally
market?
totally with you on that. Where I am presently, we use both. We use few legacy based
Mm,
softwares
yes.
and SaaS based softwares, and kind of big difference. Both have its advantages, plus and minus. But I
Agree.
think new age SaaS is pretty good to use, easy to use, easy to plug in, plug out. So it's a good place to experiment, I would say. For, I mean, I'm keeping the large
Exactly.
companies' perspective in mind. I think they are
Mm,
large companies can look at SaaS to look at these new age solutions, new innovation that is happening, test it, whether it works for the company or not, use it. If not, maybe he say maybe we'll try using it later. So I think it's a very,
simulated.
yeah, I think it's very flexible, easy to use, and I think, as you said, experience wise, much
Yeah.
better. Also, I would also suggest, I would also second that. Awesome. So I think, Varun, we've laid the context. I think now jumping on to what HuddleUp is, right? I think people would be curious to know what you guys do, what's the problem you're solving, which sector you're in. Uh,
Hmm.
are you building for Indian clients? Are you building for global clients? Would
Hmm.
be great to know that.
Perfect. Perfect. So great. I think before I jump onto Huddle, what we are doing, I think one thing I would just say, I think a lot of people here would have, who are listeners, right, must have experienced one thing when they're working in an organization, whether they are managers or they are or IC, right? Is one thing is building a relationship with each other.
True.
That always have been very tricky, right?
Correct.
This is what we realized that post pandemic, when people shifted to more remote and hybrid form of working, it took a hit because, of course, there's no FaceTime, not able to see the body language. All those things came into the picture. Of course, the remote working has a lot of other advantages as well, but everything has pros and cons. So that's when if you can realize that's problem, that is what we are solving here is, and that's what we call it as more of a building an experience for the employee. And to build the experience for the employee, of course, there are so many transactional things are there. People say it's perks, benefits, right? But these are like a very quick search in your dopamine level, but it comes down. It's not a very
True.
sustainable
It's
thing.
not a
The only
sustainable level.
sustainable, exactly, the only sustainable thing is building relationship with people around you, and most importantly, managers, because that's where you work on a daily basis.
Curious one,
So
how do you
that's one.
guys, yeah, how do you guys do it? I mean, it's pretty, I mean, building relationships obviously is critical. How are you
Mm-hmm.
guys quantifying it? How are you guys tracking it? It's one
Yes.
thing that one thing it's pretty subjective in nature. Objectifying
Mm.
it, how are you guys doing it? Pretty
Exactly.
curious.
Exactly. So this is what I wanted to say it in the fundamental level. This is a major problem that we realize.
Got
And
it.
personally, I've realized being at both sides of the table,
Correct.
right? And then when pandemic hit in, people were generally, they were burning out. They were productive, but you couldn't see the outcome.
True.
So there is a gap. They are working really hard, but why is there's no outcome? There's a
Hmm.
gap, which is an abstract gap, and
Correct.
which what we said is subjective. We wanted to take the subjectivity out of the picture and make it more objectified, right? What are the reasons why it's happening? So what we did is we realized that managers used to do a lot of conversation with their teams on an on basis regularly, right? Just to
True.
understand how are they feeling, their sentiments, are they motivated, right? And you see people are coming from different personality. An
True.
introvert, it's very hard for that person to say out things, right? They need a
Correct.
safe space channel for them to say it out on a regular basis.
Got it.
So
And
that's where we are.
is this anonymous? Is this on a consistent basis? How does it work?
Yes, I was coming there. So that's how we are building a continuous loop of feedback through our platform. So
Got it.
what we have done is talking about it, so because these things are very subjective.
True.
Feedback, opinions, perceptions, sentiments, very
Correct.
subjective things.
Correct.
What we have done is we have created an employee experience framework. That's a very proprietary thing. We have like
Got it.
psychologists and experts on board as well.
Got
We
it.
have created some 29 metrics on which we help you understand about your team sentiments. These metrics are
Interesting.
more around your managers, work, your co-workers, your organization culture values like that. Now, what happens is we have built a chatbot. Okay, that integrates directly with your Slack, Teams, WhatsApp, Google,
Got it.
is everywhere, wherever your people are,
Got it.
and then trigger good conversations to your employees on a periodic basis. Now, it could be monthly, it could be bi-weekly, bi-monthly, like that.
Got
And
it.
those conversations are like quick 8 to 10 questions. That's all. So imagine just like a friend or a manager checks in with you. So we never call it surveys. Surveys builds that compliance thing. It's more like a check-ins.
Got it.
So every month, for example, every month, every employee receive us on the Slack or wherever they are, a ping from us. Okay, time for your check-in. And it just takes 60 to 90 seconds. It's completely anonymous, 100% anonymous, that even the
That's
CEOs can't see the names. So that way
got
we
it.
have seen how people are so candid and say it out everything. Now,
Is it
every
a clickable answer based, or you need to kind of feed
it's a
in?
mix of questions, option based as well, and it's a follow up. So what?
Okay.
Suppose if I ask something about your managers, right? Is your managers being able to give you constructive feedback regularly? So it says 5 options, right? And if someone says very critical option, it has a follow up part. Okay, why do you think so? Very conversational way of having a quick chat and understanding them, capturing their feedback. And
Got
then on
it.
the basis of that, we collate all those answers together, map it with our metrics, and it has a proprietary algorithm, and then gives you those objective on a scale of 10. Okay, these are things we need to work on. These are things that have been working really well, and we give it to all the managers in the organization.
Got it.
Reason being, there's not just the HR's job.
Got it. No, that's important because you're giving it to the person who matters, right? Rather than giving it to HR, there's one more loop you are kind of avoiding and giving it to the manager for him to improve or obviously work upon things that he needs to. So just curious on how the dashboard looks like. So is it readable? Is it how easy to read is it for the manager to improve his KPIs?
So we realized that we are working with almost every kind of manager, whether they're technical or non-technical, right? So we realized we cannot use any jargons, first of all. It has to be very simple.
True.
We cannot use any scale. If we are doing NPS, we cannot use that NPS scale generally, which is minus 100%, because not everyone knows about NPS, right?
Correct.
So what we have done is we have normalized all our scores on a scale of 10. And then we tell them, okay, 8 and above is where you have more promoters, that means doing it really well. 5 to 7 is passive, 5 and below, you have more detractors. So it's very good readable. So we tell them the sentiments. So we tell you your team is happy, very good, neutral, sad, like that. Overall, that's aggregated insights. Then we come up with an engagement score, which is more like an NPS model itself on a scale of 10.
Got it.
Right. So now every manager gets an NPS score of their team.
Got it.
So they know that becomes their KPI.
Okay.
That's how it's functioning in our current customer base.
Understood.
And then we also give scores to each of those 29 metrics so that they can start taking actions where is the gap. And we start building some recommendations, one-on-ones.
That was my got it.
Yes. That is also the platform's doing.
Got it. Would be interesting to know some use cases for your customers, your present early customers. That'd be very interesting for our listeners.
Yes. So I'll give you one very interesting use case from one of our initial gaming client.
Okay. Awesome.
So what their problem was, when your employees are being hired, the first 90 days are very crucial to build their onboarding experience.
Correct.
And we were having a major gap, like attrition in that 90 days itself.
Oh,
right.
Okay.
So what we did, we helped them, just to give you the outcome. We reduced their attrition from 34% to 0 in a span of 6 months. 0. Reason being, what we did there, they were hiring in every week, like 7-10 people every week. Okay. So what we did, we have an onboarding experience module as well, where we start understanding the experience of a new hires on 7th day, 15th day, 30th, 60th, 90th. That's all, because they are very crucial. And then we were triggering questions and anonymous, and people were answering to it. And on the basis of that, we were telling them that, okay, on 15th day, these are the issues that your people are facing. On 30th day, these are the issues. You have to build those gaps. Like we have seen in high growth startups that on 30th day itself, employees have the work-life balance problems already in 30
Interesting.
days.
Interesting
So
insights.
then they realized, okay, there's a huge gap there itself. There are
Hmm.
people feeling overwhelmed, right? All these things.
Hmm.
And then they started working and spread out their entire induction program because it was very like shrunk to like 15 days itself. They
Hmm.
start taking some actions around that, and then now it's been zero. So
Wow.
that is one major use case that I want to tell you. And basically, that if I tell you on the overall basis, the major use case that we're solving, one is of course your culture alignment. Of course, even if you don't have any iteration issues, but culture alignment is important. So in this
True.
case, we are helping you with two things. One is helping you identify the real-time insights of your team engagement levels and sentiments.
Hmm.
And not at the individual level, because that way you're not able to solve any problem. We help you understand the group of people level.
Hmm.
Unanimously, what people are saying, if 80% of people are saying the same thing, why don't you work towards that, right? Because it will
Yep.
have more
Absolutely.
positive impact,
Correct.
right? So we give these kinds of insights at the
Got it.
process level. Okay.
Got it.
Second thing is manager enablement, because in Western markets, right, managers are people managers as well. Every managers are HRs on their own. India is
Hmm.
yet to happen. The behavioral change, we are seeing it. A lot of these progressive startups have taken up these actions that, okay, for every managers, your OKRs and performance KPIs not just one thing. If you need to grow up in the ladder, become leader, you have engagement KPIs. A lot of people, our customers, are using our engagement scores as their OKRs.
Wow. That's
Yes,
actually pretty game changing because in India, we typically have OKRs for managers, which are more maybe revenue or business focused. And adding
exactly.
these KPIs will give a different lens, different perspective, and different way of working for the managers. I think it's a game changer, in
Is
my opinion.
you just not need a performer, you need a people manager as well, a
Correct.
people person.
True.
You need to get the best out of your people. That is also part of your job.
Correct.
Yeah, so that's how we are just enabling it. We never say that, okay, as HuddleUp, you will lose the contact or the human connect with each other. We are never saying
Hmm.
that. We are just aiding it. We
Got
just
it.
helping you do regular one-on-ones. We are helping you
Hmm.
structure your conversations. We are helping you prioritize your conversations.
And most importantly, it's on a consistent basis. I think that typically in normal systems it gets difficult, but this on a consistent basis, you're capturing data, your algorithms are running at the back and kind of giving
So,
you patterns and trends where
exactly.
managers can kind of focus upon. So I think on behalf of Varun, shout out to managers out there who are looking for an interesting tool to improve their culture. I think you can reach out to Varun. I think Varun can take it from there. On last note, Varun, moving on to my last question, which is basically the theme of the podcast, is what's
Mhm.
next? So, would
Yes.
be keen to understand what's next in the space. I think you're in the employee experience space, if I want to categorize you guys. In that space, what do you think how the space is evolving and how HuddleUp can kind of solve the issues that come up in the future and solve those problems?
So I think for your listeners, I think first I'll tell them how the space currently looks like, and how generally in an organization, how things evolve in the people success sections, or I would say employee experience sections. So generally when a company starts, right, you have first the existential crisis. Okay, I have to give the payroll, right? Employee database to be managed, right? All these
Correct.
transactional things. That's the first thing people solve. Then they go above that. The team size is also a little bigger. Then they start solving for, okay, OKRs, goals, performance. These things are
Correct.
there,
True.
right? And now earlier, what people were using as engagement later on, engagement aspect was always taken up as something when people reach 300, 400, 500 people, then only they'll use it. That's something which is changing. Now performance
Interesting.
engagement together are being implemented in most of the
At the
companies.
at
Right?
the start, you're saying, right?
We have clients of 40 people as well to
Amazing.
4,000 people, right? So
And
that's the
Varun, to
kind
your
of,
point, I think, in my opinion, I think as early as you bring in engagement, it solves
very
many
important.
of the other issues If you can do
Very
that at the
important.
beginning.
There's always a gap that, okay, my people are skilled, first of all, right?
Correct.
Even when people say, right, initial hires, as part of founders, a lot of founders are listening to it. Everyone says your initial hires could be bad hires, right? It may happen, but if they are low on hard skills, you can still work on it. But
Correct.
if you are not heavily aligned, it's very
Yeah.
hard to work, right?
Whatever you
It's
do,
very
that hire will not be able to perform in that
exactly,
particular setup.
exactly. So these things are very important, which is evolving, right, in the companies,
Interesting.
right? And people, this is the kind of, right now you can say, people tech stacks being used, which earlier they were doing it on their own.
Correct.
Now the next thing around this itself is all of these things are working in silos.
Hmm.
Performance is working in silos, engagement working in silos. Combining these two can give you immense insights about how to build your next people initiative, your OKRs. You know, when performance, people are always, you know, all founders are very ambitious. They always tend to give larger targets. But when you give
Correct.
larger targets, how it is impacting their engagement, there is nothing like that here to build that connection,
Hmm.
which eventually leads to low on productivity, right? Productivity right now also when people see it just like task management tools or your Trello or XYZ, whatever tools they have.
Correct.
Productivity is also dependent on your alignment of the culture and how people are engaged. So
Absolutely.
all these things going to combine together. These are a lot of these things going in silos.
Hmm.
And the next thing is one more thing that also we are planning to do it is there's a lot of activity tracking that you can do that gives you a lot of insights around where is your time going. From your calendar, you have your entire days on meetings. Where is your time going? You don't know. Your Asana, if you look at it, or any project management, work management tool, task management tools, you're able to see, okay, how much of a time your bandwidth is there or not, right? Managers are always in search of, okay, where's my team bandwidth going? Right, they need to understand these things. So we are also kind of working, a lot of companies also working in this. So what happens is in the Western world, right, these platforms that you have, whether it's performance reviews, OKRs, engagement, all these things,
Right.
people are adopting it even when they are under 100 people of team. So this is where this is like a core, you can say, if you look at those pyramid, right, your basic needs and Maslow hierarchy, right, it has become
Correct.
a little more bottom right. So these things have really picked up, and few practices which generally Western world are following, and we also have started slowly following, right? Documentations and notions being used. Similarly, even at this level, the well-being aspect has become really important. And as per, I'll tell you very basic things. Culture, right? People talk about culture. People join companies because of culture, and the culture is not just your game zone or foosball and perks and benefits are offsides, right? These
Correct.
are just
True.
1 day spikes, 2 day spikes like that.
True. Very true.
It's always about your processes, the rules that you follow. And that, again, processes is being perceived always as something in your work. You have sales process or marketing process. No. Process around your culture also, around alignment with the values also. If you have all these processes involved, you need to have these platforms at as early as possible when you're growing. Because what happens is the, the teams are growing enormously and exponentially, and then suddenly 150 to 150, you don't realize, okay, what just happened? And
Correct. Very
everything
true.
starts falling apart. So adoption is very important, and as early as they adopt the founders, right, it really helps them to make sure, because the early hires needs to be there. If they start churning out quickly, then you restart a lot of things again, and the loss of productivity is there, right?
True.
So that's what we are also telling people and getting them aligned
No, I
with
think
that.
awesome. Were the clear message to founders, early stage startups, entrepreneurs out there. I think if you start early, having the engagement culture aspect as early as possible, I think huge benefits you can reap along the way. It's initially very difficult to see that kind of you have that myopic vision, but once you incorporate this early, I think huge value add that we can see. And I think Varun, you also mentioned that in Western world, it's already happening where
Yeah, yeah.
performance, your business goals, and your engagement culture is all getting aligned, and the manager kind of gets a consolidated dashboard where he can
They are
see.
driving it. they are driving it. It's just like insights, not just insights they're getting, they're driving themselves, driving those conversations themselves. So
No, that's awesome. I think that once you also work towards that in India, I think we can see immediate benefits for early stage, at the same time growth stage startups as well. I think both early and growth have different challenges, but if I
yes,
think your foundation is set right and everything is aligned, your performance, goals, and culture and engagement, I think the compounding effect that comes in is
true.
enormous, and you will
Absolutely.
get to see in short and long term as well. So on that note, Varun, thanks once again. To my listeners, feel free to reach out to Varun and the HuddleUp team to find out more on how you could implement such solutions in your work environments. On that note, Varun, once again, thank you for taking out time on a Sunday and spending
No,
time with me.
anything for you, Vishal. Thank you for having me.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Varun. Pleasure. Cheers.
Pleasure,
Bye.
pleasure.